Billionaire Sanyade Sawiris is criticizing the government on its delays in enacting a long-awaited devaluation of the pound. Here is what he said on social media on X. Postponing reforms is a disaster that will increase the extent of the critical situation we're in. The right way is to start from the black market rates, and then it will go down gradually. So everyone would agree on selling their dollars through the official channels if the two rates become equal, if they're unified. Glad to have Sanyade Okoli, CEO of Alpha African Advisory, joining us to perhaps advise the Egyptian government on what to do. Good morning. And should I be saying happy? No, you've already, I should be saying happy New Year. Welcome back. Good to have you on the show. What do you make of the rate hike?
So when I think of the three stories you've just mentioned, the word incentive keeps coming to mind, but I'll say a bit more about it.
Okay.
The rate hike, on the one hand, the Monetary Policy Committee had said earlier last year that their decisions would be based on the expectations of inflation and not just prevailing inflation rates, because as you know, the inflation rate has been coming down, a little slowly, but coming down.
Yeah.
So as at December, it was around about 31%, as opposed to about 32% the previous month. So in terms of the direction, it seems to be going down, suggesting that maybe the reason why they've increased the interest rate is less to do with inflation. I'm not saying doesn't have anything to do with it, but less to do with that, but more to do with the other point that you made, that IMF are there. And of course, we know that IMF, and we've discussed so many stories.
Yes, we have.
And the words monetary policy tightening and fiscal policy tightening is a recurring theme when you talk about IMF support.
Indeed. The impact of rate hikes, cost of borrowing, you saw people complaining there about how prices are going. What within context, I mean, are rate hikes a tough thing to do, and do they usually bring about pain?
Well, the reality is any government is juggling many economic balls, some of which, by taking the right decision to address one issue, it negatively affects the other. What do I mean? So we're talking about economic growth, you're looking at, employment rates, attracting investment. We've spoken about inflation rates, interest rate, FX rates. And the truth is, it's never linear, it's never simple in cost of borrowing for government. So inflation, they've already said, is an issue. So the typical instrument that central banks would use is the interest rate. They increase it, but what effect does that have on government borrowing, businesses borrowing, the ability for economic growth and jobs to be created on one hand, but on the other hand, it helps to attract investment. Because when you have such a big differential between interest rates and inflation rates, it means investors are having negative returns on their investments. So that's not attractive. And what then tends to happen is investors will then go to what they deem to be a safer investment, which is a hard currency, such as dollars. Especially when you have this huge differential between the official rate, which is about 30 Egyptian pounds to the dollar, and parallel rate, which can be as low as 71 Egyptian pounds to the dollar. So again, incentives.
Indeed. And okay, so I want to get to the IMF. Like you said, we've talked about them a lot. They've extended their trip apparently to work out some deal. How do you think the deal will go, and does the IMF get a fair rap on the African continent?
Well, let me ask, what rap do you think IMF
I don't think they get a good one at all. But I don't. It's just, and I think frankly, I shouldn't be sharing my opinion. Let me go with you.
So whether they have a fair rap or not, I think it's a separate show. Maybe we should do. But here's the thing. They'd approved a loan in December 2022 of roughly about 3 billion. Part of that was for the Egyptian government to allow their pound to float. But they fixed it to the dollar in March. So they stopped the disbursements, which, essentially, if you have an agreement and it's broken, then it's no surprise that
They're not going to get the money.
Yes.
Yeah.
But now the Egyptian government want the loan reinstated and even possibly expanded to as the 10 billion that you've said.
Yeah.
And IMF are not going to agree to that if what they believe the right policy are, basically they want to see what they believe the right policies are to be in place.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it's their money, it's their assessment of risk.
There you go. Yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of the currency, what do you make of Mr. Sawiris, who's worth about $3-point-something billion along with his brother, openly criticizing government policy on X, of all places?
Well, my view is that people in government, they are public servants.
Right.
I think we often forget that they are exactly that. They are there to serve the public. And I think that it is the responsibility of the public to hold their government accountable. Now, you could say, especially for people like Mr. Sawiris, given his high profile, whether they should do it publicly or privately. Right. But I think they do have a responsibility to speak up and to speak out. I think they do themselves, the country, the government a disservice if they don't say anything. And one could only, first of all, it's not the first time he's speaking out on things. And one would assume, given his profile in the country, that he probably has been having lots of private conversations. Having said that, what he's suggesting sounds so simple and sounds very much reminiscent of what people were saying in Nigeria, 5, 6, 7 months ago. Right. And when government did take those steps, the very same people are beating them up. Right. So, as I said, look, these things are complex, and it would be folly to take a simplistic view to the solution.
What's the lesson from Egypt for emerging markets? Is there a takeaway?
What's the takeaway?
Policies, hard decisions, bite the bullet.
I think, first of all, is if you make an agreement with the IMF, stick to it. Otherwise, it will come back to bite you. Yeah. Secondly, is you cannot defer much needed reforms, but you need to ensure that you think through those reforms very carefully, not just about your intended consequences, but you've got to think about the second and third and fourth order possible consequences. Yeah. So you're not ending up, essentially, you don't create a bigger hole to fill.
All right.
One hole.
Let's get to AI. Will you be hiring any AI experts and paying them $1 million a year?
I will not be paying them $1 million, but I think I've mentioned to you, we're just, the platform that we've built, which is a form of AI, essentially. Yeah. It is digitizing some of the services that we provide, because what we've seen is that a lot of people don't want to pay for the human time. Right. So we're like, okay, let's digitize it so you can do some of the work yourself and it'll be cheaper. So AI, there's no question, it's the way forward. How much people pay for it is how much do you pay for any job. It's about how much value you think you will derive from that individual. But also, as we see, if people are being hired for $1 million and they don't generate $1 million worth of value, they will be politely or sometimes not so politely asked to leave the room.
What's your take on what AI could do for financial services going forward? I mean, you've adopted it in your company, so
it will continue to transform. The sector will continue to evolve, but not just financial services, all the sectors. And if you think about it, we keep talking about AI now, but it has been happening in some kind of form. If you think about industrialization, it was really machines taking over what humans did with brawn, but over time, it has also been replacing what we do with brains. Right. And we're just going to see more and more and more of that.
Very, very interesting. It's exciting stuff. Sanyade Okoli, CEO of Alpha African Advisory. Always a pleasure getting your thoughts on these pressing matters. Thank you so much for joining us.